Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today for our presentation on the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. This is our second installment. Earlier this month, we had an overview of the NSF-GRFP and the different components to that. That is available on our website for you to refer to at your leisure as needed, as well as some various handouts, including the PowerPoint presentation. Today, we're going to speak specifically on personal statements, which is one of the key application requirements for the NSF-GRFP. Before we get into personal statements, just want to go over briefly the NSF-GRFP again. This is a National Science Foundation, so federal government funded fellowship program. It's one of the oldest government subsidies in higher education from 1940s, I believe. And it is to ensure that we have the proper science and engineering workforce that we need to be a productive and efficient society and grow with technology and grow with the world. So the benefits of the NSF-GRFP, as you may recall, this is a 5-year fellowship that provides you with 3 years of hard funding. And that is $34,000 a year stipend for 3 years. That's over 12 months. Tuition coverage wherever you choose to go. The University of Utah, if you have a GRFP and you bring that here, will cover your health insurance. And we will also cover $2,000 a year for 3 years of research expenses to fund your research that you're conducting in your lab, cover travel expenses to conferences, and other expenses that you may incur during your PhD. The GRFP does provide career and life balance, so family leave if you have a baby during this time, for example, if you adopt or whatnot, and you need to take time away from your research, the NSF does allow that sort of life balance there. And then access to other professional development opportunities, such as the intern program, which can extend your funding to allow you to go and research in another country, for example. Some of the other benefits here are the fellowship is mobile. This means that you can take it wherever you would like to. The NSF-GRFP is funding you. It's not funding the institution that you're at today or where you will be attending for graduate school. It is wherever you choose to take it, wherever you attend. And we do have some students who come to one school, begin their PhD, and as they get down into their research, they find, okay, we're going off in this really finite area, as one does with a PhD, and there's a professor over at this school that is more of a specialist in this area, and they've invited me into their lab. So students transfer with their GRFP and the fellowship goes with them. Occasionally, this can be a step up in graduate admissions. We've heard numerous stories of students who were, let's say, rejected or waitlisted by Yale, Harvard, MIT, etc. And then they call up and say, hey, I just got the GRFP and I'm still interested in going to your school, studying in your program, and they'll get admitted. So this can be helpful as you prepare for graduate school for those of you who have not yet taken that step into graduate school. Thank you, Danny, for your question. The grant would not be able to go to Canada. It's any school in the United States that has an eligible research-based master's or PhD program. So unfortunately, as this is a federally funded award, it is here in the United States and it is for US citizens. However, there is the intern program. So if you are a GRFP and you want to extend your research funding after your fellowship, you can, through your institution, apply for what's called intern. And that can allow you additional funding to go and study, or I shouldn't say study, go and research abroad. So if you're studying here in the United States, Danny, and you're working on your PhD at, let's say, the University of Utah, where we all want to go, and you are going to go and conduct research in Canada while attending the University of Utah, that absolutely is okay. Okay. Prestige and recognition are some additional benefits of this. NSF-GRFP is not a common award that is handed out to a lot of people. So this looks really good on your resume or your CV and can be a step up with other opportunities. And especially for those of you who are seeking a career in academia, this establishes a pattern of seeking and getting external funding. I get students coming to me saying, well, I'm already funded by my PI. I'm working in their lab. I really don't need this because I don't need the money. I'm already funded. Well, you're funded because your PI is funded. One day you'll be that PI and you need to be able to get funded yourself. So establishing a pattern of seeking and getting funding is very important. And again, it looks really good as you are seeking jobs in academia. To be eligible, you must be a United States citizen, national, or permanent resident, and enrolled or you intend to enroll in a research-based master's or doctoral program in an eligible STEM field. And I encourage you to go to our website or the NSF's website where we have this really specifically expanded upon what constitutes as chemistry. There's for each of these sections, there's at least a dozen different subcategories that you can choose from. It can really help you determine which panel you want to submit to and have your application reviewed by. So you may, for example, be earning a chemistry degree, a chemistry PhD, but your research is more materials research or physics and astronomy. So as you look at these different sections here, it's less about what is the degree program, what's the name that's going to go in your diploma, but what is your research relating to? Because they're not always the same thing. Who isn't eligible for the GRFP? Students in joint professional and research programs such as a JD, PhD, business administration or management degrees, so an MBA, a MAC degree, we do not cover those. Counseling, social work, history and education, philosophy is also included in there. History, philosophy, and education are eligible if this does relate to STEM. The history of STEM, the philosophy of STEM, science policy can also be funded. We do have some poli-sci students out there who do get funded as they study policies that relates to science. Also, research with a disease-related goal, unless you're in the biomedical section there. Disease-related research is more NIH than NSF. Clinical research is not covered by NSF, and pharmacological behavioral intervention, research relating to diagnosis, therapy, and treatment, more NIH than NSF. These are both government programs, federal programs, and they do not compete with one another. So your application has three primary components. You will, of course, enter into the portal all your basic information about you, but you will submit your transcripts from all degree granting institutions you've attended, even if you have not yet, or if you did not earn a degree from that institution. So if you attended a community college, but transferred before you got your associate's degree to your baccalaureate granting institution, you'll still include those transcripts from that community college. You'll have two primary statements, your personal statement, which we'll talk about today, and your graduate research plan statement, which we'll discuss in 2 weeks. And reference letters. 2 are required. We recommend 3, and you can put in up to 5 names, just in case one is not able to provide a letter of recommendation for you. So today, to the business of the hour. The personal statement, which is your personal, relevant background and future goals statement, or personal statement. This is a maximum of 3 pages. Single space is just fine. Must address broader impacts and intellectual merit. And this is a new requirement with the NSF. These must have their own subhead. You must have a subheader for intellectual merit and another for broader impact. No subheads, no review. So it's very important. And that is very new to the NSF's requirement on their application. So before we get started in writing, and for those of you who have not began your writing, take a moment to ponder. You can do this now, but I encourage you after this workshop to take some time to really reflect on this. The NSF-GRFP is a very competitive award. We receive about 17,000 applications for about 2,000, 2,500 awards. So it's about 20-ish% rate. So the students who are applying to this, I have students who come into my office and say, well, I have a good GPA, so of course they're going to consider me. Well, everyone who applies is going to have a really good GPA. Everyone who applies is going to be interested in STEM. But what sets you apart from everyone else, from all the other high achieving students? So take some time to reflect. What's special, unique, or distinctive or impressive about your story? What's unique to you? What sort of challenges and obstacles have you had to overcome for you to get where you are today, to have worked in the labs that you've worked in, or to have gotten the degree and the educational experiences that you've had so far? What details about you would help set you apart from others? And with that, what will help differentiate you from others for the reviewers? Very important with any sort of application writing is you want to make it easy for the reviewers to see why you are a top candidate for that award. How did you become interested in your field? And what did you learn from that experience, and how has that path impacted you? One thing that I get frequently from students is they say something like, I had a family member who died of cancer when I was young, so I want to study science to save lives and change the world. Well, that's great. That's great, but really kind of telling that story. I had a family member who had cancer, and I saw them go through treatments, and it piqued my curiosity in biology and chemistry, which led me to these various experiences, getting this degree, working on this research. So really saying or outlining the path that you took, what piqued that interest, and how you explored that interest is very, very important. What have you learned about the field through classes, through various readings, seminars, and other work experiences that you may have had? What has impacted you from those that really said, I want to dive in a little deeper. I want to study this more. How have you capitalized on opportunities that are available to you? For those of you who did undergraduate research through a PI, talk about that experience in one way or another. If you participated with, like here at the University of Utah, we have the undergraduate research program. If you engaged in that, how do these experiences impact you? Did you participate in other clubs for science or outreach? Did you have any leadership roles with those organizations? Talk about that. That's part of your story. And what reasons can you give the reviewers to be interested in you? So you will be talking about your research in this and the research plan. You're going to be talking about you in this and the research plan statement. But this is where you talk about you more than your research. This is where you talk more about you than the research you've done in someone's lab. This is where you say, this is the potential I have as a researcher, as a scholar, as a scientist. So starting your personal statement, you want to hook in your reviewers, the readers of your application. And you want to start by talking about you. Again, it's very important to remember that the National Science Foundation is not aiming to fund your institution, your faculty mentor, or your PI's lab. They are interested in funding you today, going into a graduate program, and the potential you have as a researcher and a leader. A fun fact about the NSF-GRFP is we have approximately 40 Nobel laureates who 30 years prior to receiving the Nobel Prize were NSF-GRFPs. So there is this connection between leadership and discovery and innovation and the GRFP. So you want to consider starting your statement with something like, why I decided to pursue a graduate degree, why I'm studying this specific area of science and this really finite field. I'm really interested in this really finite research question, or this is a pre-doc award, early career. So what you're interested in today, what you're most passionate about with science. You're not just studying science, you're getting a master's or a PhD because you're really invested in this. What's that passion? Talk about that. Share an outstanding research experience. Talk about some challenges that you may have overcome that have brought you to where you are today and positioned you for this award. Some other openers that can help hook in your reviewer: talk about the research experiences that have helped you determine to go to graduate school. When that light bulb went off saying, this is the path I need to go on. An example of outreach experience. We're going to talk more about those broader impacts as we go along. What in STEM you're passionate about and why. What's that story that hooked you in? Different experiences that you've had that have helped really broaden and increase that passion. Your broader impacts in the community and your personal background that led you down this unique path. Are you unlikely, based on your background, to be where you are today? How did you overcome those challenges? So intellectual merit and broader impacts. This matrix sort of separates the two between you, your personal statement, and your work, your research plan. So your intellectual merits, this is usually very easy for graduate students to talk about compared to their broader impacts. This is your merit, your GPA, your scholarly aptitude, and your experience so far. This is where you will discuss and describe your motivation, your ability, your research experience. What sort of preparation have you taken to be ready to conduct research now? Different achievements you've had, different awards you've gotten, your persistence and perseverance, and your professional and your scholarly goals for the future. Broader impacts. This is where we have scholars have a little bit of a struggle compared to intellectual merit. This is your impact. So this is where you'll describe your background, your personal story, broadening participation, outreach into the community, identity, initiative, leadership, communicating science. So have you been involved in different organizations? You've been out doing good in the community? Talk about the impact that that is making. It does not necessarily have to be STEM specific. If you have been involved with different community organizations and you're out there and the work that you did is still having an impact today, even though you might not be out there working in the community. Talk about that. The NSF is very interested not in just your ability to conduct research and important research, but impacting the community that you're in. There's this understanding. I'm going down the path of a PhD. Yes, the goal is I will do this research. I will go and present posters at conferences. I will write articles, whether by myself or with my research team or my PI, and focus on getting publishing that research that can advance science and advance the research of other scholars as well. You'll talk about that, but that's also sort of an expectation when you are studying under the umbrella of the National Science Foundation. They're very equally interested in knowing you're conducting your research, let's say in Salt Lake City. How are you impacting Salt Lake City's community? How might your research impact Salt Lake City? So between your research plan and your personal statement. So you'll talk about your past, where you are today, and the impact and potential and the acumen you have for the future. Intellectual merits, as we mentioned, this is your documented intellectual ability, your GPA, your awards, talking about some of the challenging classes you've taken. You chose not to just take the classes that'll get you to a degree, but you've explored your curiosity in your specific field through other opportunities in class. Your reviewers will have your transcripts to look at, but they might not necessarily know that this was a particularly challenging class or this wasn't required, but you really took the extra opportunity to dive in a little more. You want to show evidence of your ability to plan and conduct research, conduct research and work independently. As mentioned a few times already, the NSF is funding you, not your PI, not their lab, it's funding you. Your ability to communicate research. So this kind of goes with the broader impacts. It's not just, am I able to conduct the research, but how am I sharing that research? And your ability to take initiative, solve problems, and persist. Thank you, Michael, for your question. Should this focus on your entire academic journey, meaning starting from first year of undergrad? Whatever's relevant to your story that is important for your reviewers to know. If you had an outstanding experience in your first year of undergrad, your second year of undergrad, that really defined the path you're on today, talk about it. If you feel like freshman year, sophomore year was pretty average, and you didn't really have those epiphanies, those light bulb moments of this is the path I want to be on, or you weren't working on research at that time, you don't have to talk about that. The important thing here is focusing on what is important for the reviewer to know of your journey. So if that does start with the first years of undergrad, great, talk about it there. If not, go ahead and focus on where that does start. Some applicants will be talking about experiences that they had in high school that led them to pursuing certain things in college, that led them to pursuing various things in graduate school. So whatever's unique and relevant for your story. Your broader impacts. This is where you'll describe your impact on society, on the community around you, personally and through your research. So as a scholar, as a researcher, and as a leader. So this is your opportunity to describe for your reviewer what is important for them to know about your participation with and impact on a diverse population. The NSF does have quite a focus and priority on serving diverse populations and championing diverse scholars and researchers and students from diverse backgrounds. Question that came in from Zia. Thank you, Zia. How might applications differ from people who are accepted into graduate programs compared to people who are not in grad school yet? This is an important question. Thank you so much for bringing this up. There are 3 different levels of review. First is as a rising senior. You're in your senior year and you're preparing to go to grad school next year. So you're applying right now for the GRFP. Or you might have taken a year off or a couple of years off. You've not yet started graduate school. You'll still be on that level 1. Then there's level 2. You're going into your first year of graduate school. So let's say this fall, you're starting your master's or PhD program, and you submit your application in October when the GRFP is due. So you'll be that level 2, you're entering your graduate program. And then there's L3, level 3, where you are a second year student. So you're going into your second year of graduate studies, and that is your last opportunity to apply for the GRFP. Each of these different levels, you will be compared to your peers in that same group. So if you are applying as a student going into your second year of a PhD, you will not be evaluated compared to someone who is a senior. So if you are not accepted into a program, that's just fine. You're going to be compared to other students who are in your same boat. They either have not started graduate school, they have not heard back yet. And the reviewers are very understanding of this. The reviewers are professors who are part of that mechanism on their own campuses, the admissions and recruitment. So they understand you're a senior, you've probably applied to colleges or graduate programs, or you're working on those applications to graduate programs. So you don't necessarily know where you're going. That is just fine, and it should not prove to be a problem at all. Okay. So back to broader impacts. So your participation with an impact on diverse populations, your outreach, teaching, mentoring, how you've impacted STEM education in schools such as K-12 schools. If you've been a tutor, for example, of other undergraduates, if you've helped teach or tutor math or science, or you've worked in a lab. Community outreach, participating in or leadership of various science clubs or other organizations where you have been a leader. Have you done any writing, any blogging, any podcasts about research, about STEM, about science, or participate in other media? Talk about that. That could be if that's an important part of your journey, talk about that under your broader impacts. Your impact in creating and cultivating a diverse workforce. and increase collaboration between academic and industry. So not all of you will have experience in these different areas. So impact in creating and cultivating a diverse workforce. We have non-traditional students applying for the GRFP who took 5 or 10 years off to work in industry. That this is a good opportunity for them to talk about how they have impacted the workforce through their leadership. Writing about your experience. So this is important to describe the sorts of projects you've worked on, whether independently, projects you've done for your education so far, things you've done through undergraduate research initiatives, research you've done with your professors along the way, or for those of you in grad school right now, your current PI. So who is your research advisor or faculty mentor? Talk about that connection if it's relevant. How did you get involved? For some students, how you got involved in your research is going to be that same story of what got you interested in science. And so that can help piece together a nice thematic story. What was your role in the research? Were you independent? Were you part of a team? If you were on that team, what was your role on that team? What sort of skills and knowledge was gained from that experience? Some of the applications that I've read on this, students will say, I learned project management skills here because my role was XYZ, or I was exposed to quantitative research methodology in this. And as I plan my research at this point moving forward, this helped me develop an understanding of research methodology and help me determine the path I want to go with my own personal research. Talk about that. It does not necessarily have to be skills I've learned are, I know how to work in a lab. Those are important skills, but don't limit yourself if you learned other soft skills like project management, teamwork and collaboration, troubleshooting. What were the results of your research projects? Any publications? Did you do any presentations? Win any awards or have any sort of recognition? Talk about that. So this is what I would suggest or recommend to you as a structure for your 3 pages. A lot of students come into my office for this or other awards and say, it's only 3 pages, easy peasy. But then once you get writing, oh my goodness, I have to somehow stuff all of this into just 3 pages. So it can be a bit of an experience making that all fit and work. So this is my recommendation. This is what other advisors in the field are recommending for your personal statement as well. Begin with telling your story. So think of these 3 columns as 3 pages. Start by telling your story with your hook, why you're in grad school or what led you here, what was your path, what really got you interested in your specific field. Talk about that. Then go into, in the middle of your first page, your relevant background. I earned a degree in this. I'm a first-year graduate student. Here's what I'm doing. And then you'll go to your intellectual merits, including your research experience. And you'll spend a page on that, 2 half pages on that. And then you'll dive into your broader impacts. I recommend starting with intellectual merits and then broader impacts, because depending on what you talk about in your intellectual merit, research that you've participated in, for example, you might then be able to segue really seamlessly into, and here's how this impacted the community. Here's how we serve the community. But broader impacts will also be an area where you talk about outreach experiences that you've had, such as taking that research into the community, international collaborations or collaborations with researchers at other institutions, any teaching or mentorship that you have done, any leadership roles that you've experienced and honed your role in. Talk about that there. And then you'll go into your preparedness to plan and conduct research. You'll have a separate research plan to talk about the more finite details of your research, but what made you prepared to conduct your research? The NSF, as I've said a few times already, they're investing in you. They're investing in you conducting your research, and part of their due diligence is they want to make sure that you're ready to do your research. So talk about how you've been prepared for that. And then you will end with your future goals. this is your future scholarly goals. I want to continue my research down this path and then have these outcomes, I hope, at this point. Or I want to pursue work at a teaching college where I can focus on STEM education. Or I plan to go into industry where I will do XYZ. It's okay to have two options there to say I'm equally as interested going into academia and research as much as I am going into industry to do XYZ. It is okay to go into industry and mention that here. It's okay to say I'm entertaining two plans that are very important to me at this point in time. One question I get from students when I go over all of this, particularly the future goals, is, oh, what if? A lot of what if questions. What if my research doesn't pan out the way I thought it was? What if I talk about going into academia, but life happens and I go into industry? That is okay. The NSF is not going to come back and say, you said you're going into academia and you went into industry. Not good, not good. That will not happen. And on your research plan, you'll also talk about your plan Bs. The NSF and the reviewers, again, who are researchers and professors, they will understand that research, there's your plan, and then things happen. So your research plan is where you might talk about plan B. I plan to collect my data in this way. However, I may have to go down this route depending on what is possible. And there's nothing like a global health crisis pandemic to really show us that it's important to have those plan Bs. And you'll talk about that there. So don't feel like when you talk about your research goals, your professional goals, your scholarly goals for the future, that it has to be 100% spot on. This is the path I'm on, and I will not deviate from this ever at all. This is where you are right now. Where you are 5 years from now could be the same place, it could be a different place, and the NSF understands that. So again, this is my recommendation. You want to piece together these different elements in a way that makes sense for you, makes sense for your story. As a reminder, broader impacts and intellectual merits, you must have a header, a subheader on the page saying intellectual merit, talk about it. Broader impacts, talk about it. No header, no review. That's what the NSF is currently advising. But then as you talk through your various pieces here, as mentioned before, you want to make this easy for your reviewers. You can have other headers. You can have a header saying future goals, relevant background, whatever makes sense for you. You can bold different things that you want to stand out for your reviewers, such as a sentence here where I really want them to understand XYZ. Go ahead and bold that. That is okay. Some writing tips. Write very clearly. This is a given, but this is also weakness. You want to be pithy and succinct. 3 pages is not a lot at all. So you only want to include what is necessary. Kind of as we were talking before with Michael's question, should I start all the way at the very beginning? Well, if it's necessary, if it's an important part of your story, absolutely. If it's not necessary and doesn't really play a pivotal role in your story that you're trying to illustrate here, don't include that. Only put in what is necessary and important. Omit unnecessary language, especially technical jargon. You will be reviewed by people in your field. So let's say that you are submitting to chemistry. You will be reviewed by other chemists, but they will not necessarily, and most likely not, be a specialist in that very finite area. So if you go using technical jargon that someone outside your finite area of study and interest is not familiar with, don't use that. One thing that we say with these applications, yes, you're talking about some technical things, but you want to have someone who is not in your field, someone who's outside of STEM. Have a parent, a sibling, a classmate from English class, read through it. And if the research makes sense to them, the idea of the research, then that's good. If they're saying, well, there's all these words that I don't understand, use different language, avoid that technical jargon when you are able to. Use shorter words rather than longer, more complicated vocabulary, and make sure each sentence is purposeful. Again, 3 pages is not a lot, and you want to get straight to the point. One thing a program officer once told me about the reviews is these are professors, they're doing their teaching, they're doing their research. They have busy lives themselves outside of their professional world and their research world as well. So think of your reviewer as someone who gets home after a long day at work. They spend time with their spouse, their children, dealing with various domestic things around the house or the community. And then at 10 o'clock at night, just as they're ready to go to bed, they realize, oh, I have these 10 GRFP applications I have to review. And so they're going to be tired. They've had a long day. You want to make it easy for them to read. You want to piece things together appropriately where things flow. You want to highlight through bolding or whatnot. Don't actually highlight what is most important and key for them to know. You want to make it very interesting and easy for that reviewer who's had a long day to be able to get through this and say, oh, I understood this. I didn't have to go searching for things. It all just kind of played out. And part of that is making sure each sentence is purposeful. Know your audience. So as I mentioned, this is going to be reviewers. Your reviewers are going to be researchers. They're going to be professors. They're going to be people who have a STEM background. So keep that in mind. Know what they're looking for. The solicitation is going to really help you with this. Visit my website, nsf-grfp.utah.edu. We have a database of previous winning applications that you can look at that give a good example of this, and write in a way that makes sense for a reader to get the info they need to make a decision. You want them to get to the end and say, okay, I understood that. I don't need to reread this. I'm good to go. And be confident in yourself. This is your opportunity to sell yourself, so to say. Remember that the NSF is funding you, not your PI, not your research team, not your institution, but you. So you need to really highlight you. Take ownership of your scholarly and research path and your career goals. Don't be wishy-washy. Say, I have confidence in this path. I put some thought into this, and I want you to know that I've done as much due diligence as I can at this point as a senior going into graduate school, as a first-year PhD student, what have you. Take ownership. Don't underestimate your accomplishments. This is not a time to be modest. So don't understate your accomplishments. If something was meaningful, talk about it. If you played a role, talk about that role. Don't mitigate the importance of whatever your role with the research experiences you've had was. And you want to highlight what that role was, including leadership experience. And this leads to the importance of using I statements. I did this, rather than we. We as a lab team, we did this. We as collaborating with my PI and a research team, we did this. Don't say we, say I. I worked with my PI and I did this. I worked in this particular role and here's what I accomplished. And of course, tell your compelling story. Some important considerations here is the NSF is really working towards some diversity goals here. They want a diverse and qualified applicant pool with particular attention being paid to, in addition to gender and racial ethnic minorities and that sort of diversity, but students attending or who have attended minority serving institutions, an MSI, students studying or who grew up in EPSCOR jurisdictions, and I'll get to that in a second, and non-traditional education tracks. So EPSCOR is an established program to stimulate competitive research. This is the NSF saying these states and territories, we're focusing on these areas because we want to see more STEM activity going on here. We want to see more research going on with this community, in this community, or people from this community. So if you are from or you completed an undergrad in or you are planning to attend graduate school in an EPSCOR jurisdiction, and that was an integral part of your journey, talk about that. Talk about how that locale may have impacted your trajectory. If that locale, for example, was a challenge for you to pursue, talk about how you overcame that challenge. And the EPSCOR jurisdictions are as follows: Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Guam, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, US Virgin Islands, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. So as you see here, it's not just 50 from the 50 states, but we have United States territories there as well. So if any of you are nationals of US Virgin Islands, if you're from Puerto Rico, you are still eligible for this because you are considered a United States citizen, even though you're not from Alabama, Alaska, etc. Non-traditional students, a moment to speak to you here. Please apply if you're interested, if you're back to school pursuing a PhD or a master's, please apply. Do not feel hesitant about you've been out of school for a while or whatnot. In your narrative, you have the unique opportunity to discuss the how and the why relating to you returning to school. This would be why are you returning to school now?
But also
at the end, like
as a quick reminder, we'll go ahead and mute everyone just so we don't have the feedback there. Talk about why you're returning to school now. What has led you to that decision for right now being when you're returning? What experience is kind of motivating that? Why grad school and why in this particular area? We, for example, will see individuals who they graduated, they went and worked in a lab for 10 years, and now they want to go and get that PhD. So why in this particular area? What was your motivation to take this step? And how did you spend your time away from school? Talk about, if that's an important part of your journey, talk about that. Especially as a non-traditional student, the reviewers are interested in that journey. They want to hear what these motivating factors are for you to, after stepping away from school, to come back. Some common weaknesses with NSF-GRFP application writing: a very unorganized personal statement that doesn't tell a clear story. As best as you're able, you want to have a theme. You want things to flow. Kind of as I mentioned, start with your intellectual merits and then go into your broader impacts, because hopefully the two are connected. We did this research. Here's how we impacted society or a community with that. So you have a nice flow. Unorganized, haphazard, it's not going to look good. Dense writing that is difficult to understand or uninteresting. So part of good broader impacts or potential for broader impacts is the ability to communicate science, to communicate what you're doing as a researcher and a scholar to larger audiences. And so if you're not able to take your personal statement and write that in a way that is light, pithy, succinct, where people from broad and different backgrounds are able to understand, that's not going to look good. Both, it's going to be difficult for the reviewer to get to the end of the 3 pages, but they're also going to think to themselves, ooh, they're not necessarily exhibiting through their writing that they're prepared with great skills to communicate science to broader communities. Too much jargon. Don't use jargon unless you 100% have to. And failure to address broader impacts. As I mentioned at the beginning, our scholars tend to have a really good ability of saying, I've got this high GPA. I've experienced these demanding classes or expectations in the classroom, intellectual merits, but they're generally going to be weaker at broader impacts. So be sure to pay a lot of attention to those broader impacts, articulating them in a very favorable way. Drafting your personal statement, your research statement, and really any application for a fellowship that you may be applying to. Start with an outline, build your theme, make sure that you have in there all the different requirements for the GRFP personal statement or whatever you're writing about. Map it out, make sure it works for you. Go through multiple drafts of your personal statement. We generally recommend that you spend 3 to 6 months preparing for your submission. And the reason for that is not because it takes 3 to 6 months, but because you want to give yourself plenty of time to draft, review, dissect, and redraft so that you are submitting something very well polished. And ask your faculty mentor, ask a classmate, and be sure to ask someone outside of your area, outside of STEM, such as a parent, a sibling, a classmate from another part of campus to review and provide feedback. And utilize your resources. We're here to help you be successful, so don't hesitate. First things first, visit the annual solicitation. This can be found at nsfgrfp.org. The 2022 solicitation comes out in July, but 2021 is up and posted, and there generally will be little to no change between this year and next year's solicitation. Previous workshops, tools, and resources can be found online, nsf-grfp.utah.edu, as well as the NSF has their own resources available to you as well, different Q&As that can help you. For example, your faculty mentor is going to be very key in helping you here. The University of Utah Writing Center can absolutely be a huge help to you when you're writing your personal statement, writingcenter.utah.edu, and graduate fellowship advising. My role here in the Office of Fellowships and Benefits in the Graduate School is to help you seek funding. So if you would like to meet with me to go over your drafts, help you strategize, help you brainstorm your broader impacts and your intellectual merits, please reach out to me. My contact information will be on a slide. And you'll get a follow-up email from me. Reach out to me, let's set an appointment, let's talk. And we have upcoming workshops, again, a resource for you to utilize. Next week at 10 a.m., we will be discussing how to articulate your broader impacts. This is going to be done by my colleagues with the STEM Ambassadors Program from the College of Science. And the week after that, we will talk about crafting graduate research plans, which is the other important, which is the other necessary documents that you will be submitting as part of your GRFP application. And again, questions, comments, if you would like to meet with me to discuss your application, please reach out to me, fellowships@gradschool.utah.edu. You can also visit our website, nsf-grfp.utah.edu. Okay, so the time is now yours. For any questions or concerns that you may have, you can go ahead and raise your hand and unmute yourself, or you can type your question into the chat box, either to everyone or privately to me. Okay, got a question already. Benvin, thank you. Does any of this advice change if we are not in a field that is traditionally considered STEM, but is still covered by the NSF? So economics, perhaps we should talk offline to help you brainstorm with this, but if you have a STEM inclusion, which it sounds like you may, such as STEM policies, economic policy around science and such, if there's a STEM connection, apply. I would recommend applying. And as an economics student, you could do this under the social science panel. But I would be happy to talk with you offline to help you brainstorm. I last week was talking with some reviewers who were giving me some advice on the social science side of this. And they mentioned, you know, I've had a poli-sci student where it really fell into this gray area where a small part of it was very STEM heavy, but it was a very small part of their research. And they got the GRFP. So if you feel like you're in this gray area, but you have that really solid STEM connection, pursue it. That's my recommendation. But Benvin, please reach out to me and let's talk and work through this. Okay, other questions, concerns? We'll give it a few more minutes just in case anyone is typing right now. So while we're waiting a few minutes, I just want to mention that this recording will be put on our website with the PowerPoint slides. I'll be reaching out to you with those links as soon as I get this up. Okay, and it looks like we don't have any other questions. So I will stay on once I end the recording, just in case anyone wants to talk off the recording or without an audience of others. But with that, have a great day. Please let me know if there's anything my office can do to support you in pursuing the NSF-GRFP. And I hope to see you next week with broader impacts.